Hello, everyone. My name is John Gargiulo. I'm the co-founder and CEO of ReadySet. Really excited to be with you all today. We've got an amazing guest in Cody Plofker. We're going to be talking all things Meta, what's new, what you might want to care about, what you probably shouldn't care about at all. Welcome, Cody.
Yeah, thanks so much, John. Thanks for having me. Super excited to chat and do this.
Same. It's a really good time to be talking. If somehow you haven't been following Cody on Twitter for the last 4 years or don't know of him, he joined Jones Road Beauty from the outset 4 years ago and helped grow them to become a $150 million brand. It's really incredible. I understand you guys are opening stores now as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's been a ride. It's been a journey. Been a lot of growth and hopefully a lot of growth ahead as well.
Very cool. And I'm sure you've had to learn a lot along the way. Let's talk about Meta. We're going to be covering a lot. Mostly, my hope is folks watching this will come away from this with super actionable ideas, new things you didn't know, as we hurdle towards Black Friday, Cyber Monday, just how to get everything lined up. Again, what launches you ought to be paying attention to and not. You were at a Meta event yesterday in New York where they announced and launched and talked about a lot of the things they're working on. What was your takeaway from that?
Yeah, good timing. So relevant timing, got some fresh ideas. A lot of them were things that I have heard. You know, we're in the Disruptors program, so our reps do a really good job keeping us up to date, and we get to test some things early, which is really cool. But one thing I like to do is pay attention to how they're marketing. I think they're incredible product marketers, and so kind of jokingly, I had somebody on my team tally every time they said AI or incrementality, and I was surprised. I thought AI was going to win out. Incrementality crushed it. And I brought that up to my rep later, like jokingly, but she's like, "Yeah, like that's a really big focus." We can talk about incrementality-based attribution, but it just seems like it's something that they're really
It
bullish
probably
on.
sounds like, listen, I'm a total AI nerd. We're building airposts.ai to automate ads and incrementality. That word, it's what everyone's been after since the beginnings of Facebook. It's what we're all seeking. What were they saying, and what are you feeling about sort of those features they've introduced?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think incrementality, the two biggest things, and obviously AI is still a huge focus for them, but outside of that, incrementality and driving business value. And so, they've got this new incrementality-based attribution product, which we can talk about. I'm definitely bullish on. We tested it and we'll share about it. I think that, and then like using the platform to drive towards businesses' value, which they have some things that are more in the works. They're kind of showing their roadmap. But I think those things are really cool. And I think just as, economy changes and it is no longer that whole growth at all costs, VC funded thing, they're hearing a lot more about brands expecting, contribution margin and profit outcomes as their main KPIs. And so they're trying to start orient their systems to that because obviously the more they can help brands and advertisers optimize towards those things, hopefully the better those brands will do, the more they'll spend. So they're just trying to align those incentives.
That is fascinating and brings up an existential question we'll circle back to later on. How much control do you want to give to Meta, right? Like Zuckerberg in the last earnings call said, he's the think furthest ahead guy because he's the top of the company and that's what those guys do. Eventually you're going to tell us your business goals. We're going to take care of everything from there. We make the creative, we know what's working, we see your P&L, and that's probably very exciting for him. I don't know how much it is for others, but I want to stay with this set of incrementality features. I saw just a couple weeks ago in time for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, they're testing something where you can offer a discount, but only to a first-time buyer. Tell me about the big feature that you mentioned they launched a couple months back, maybe the retail stuff. What are they doing that's worth paying attention to when it comes to incrementality?
Yeah, so there were a few big ones recently. One of them is incrementality-based attribution. So Meta has the ability to, for just kind of setting context, incrementality refers to like optimizing and trying to deliver ads to purchases that, the system believes would not have happened otherwise if they didn't show ads versus normal attribution is, you're hoping it's incremental, but it's showing ads to people that click within that time period or click and view within the time period you're optimizing for. And so, Meta now it's self-serve. You used to need a rep and a team to do it. Can do user level holdouts. So they can actually, create a controlled experiment where you're not showing some people ads, you're showing people ads and actually understanding the true incremental impact of that ad spend. And now that's something anybody can do self-serving platform. And so
have you guys played around with it? I remember when they announced it not that long ago, it was big news. What's been your experience?
Yeah, so we did test it. I would say I'm very bullish on it. For us, it did not outperform our business as usual optimization, but I'm very bullish on it. We have done multiple, meta conversion lift holdout tests on different products, so they do have your data. So if you have done conversion level holdouts with Meta, they can use yours. If not, they kind of are going off of system level data that they have from other brands. It didn't outperform our normal stuff. I don't know if this was just blowing smoke, but our reps shared with us it's because our normal stuff is pretty incremental and just happens to perform pretty well. But I have heard some very good things from other brands, and I think it's one of those things. We tested it; it was still in beta. I think it is general, access now, but it's something that I'm super bullish on. And as always, you've got to test these things for your brand, right? Like what works one is not going to work for
they're
other.
the worst they'll ever be. Like Meta's still figuring it out as well. And you said it. I mean, you guys have optimized the heck out of stuff. A lot of those tests that you just referred to, probably most people listening haven't necessarily done all of those things, the intensity and with the team that you have. So very cool on that. Talk to me about omni-channel attribution. It sounds like that's something they're working on even outside of digital.
Yeah, this was a new one. First, I've heard of it in beta, actually. First, yes, I heard of it. I think I'm allowed to talk about it, hopefully, because I shared it during the event. But you will be able to, right now, we have 6 of our own stores. We use Shopify point of sale. So if you have your own point of sale that you own and you're not in, wholesale, you can actually, as part of the beta, hopefully it'll be available to everybody, you can actually optimize towards both of those. Kind of like, website and shops, right? You're kind of putting them together and say, hey, like, Meta, you decide where to send it, but like these are, two places people can purchase, and you can pass back that data via an offline CAPI. So, we haven't done it yet. I don't know exactly how it would be done. If we work with Blotout for a CAPI, there's probably some way to pass this back through, Conversions API. And so I think that's great. Like we don't necessarily care for us if somebody's buying in our store or online. Technically, it's probably better margin profile in our store.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Like we normally look at like a 1-day click for our Meta attribution. I would imagine we'd have to expand that for a store purchase and probably go to like a 7-day. I don't know the specifics. And again, we've got to test it, but I think that's awesome. It's just another way to.
It is awesome. I think the whole concept is just so powerful because like you said, the margins on retail are higher. You can bring a giant pallet of Jones Road products and drop it off versus send every individual one through the mail, right? Just that right there. Yeah. And it's never been done before. Like we've been talking to this huge like gas station chain called Casey's in the Midwest that most people haven't heard of out here. That's actually like a multi-billion-dollar brand. And I was talking to the CMO about exactly that. Like they're not selling, skin cream through the internet. They are trying to get people to use their gas stations and their convenience stores, but they have no way to actually track if that's working. There's so many brands that are spending so much money on Facebook that are trying to drive to retail and have no clue if it's working or not.
Yeah, totally agreed. So I'm excited about that one. And then another one I'm pretty excited about that, is not totally available now. Like right now you have value optimization. I think kind of what Mark Zuckerberg was talking about when he's saying, eventually you could just give us your business goals is right now the majority of people optimize towards, maximize conversions. And what a lot of advertisers are telling their Meta teams is they really care about maximizing contribution margin, right? And so if there's a way, and we have it set up, we've been working with Blotout to do it, but we'll begin testing it soon, is actually being able to send that gross margin data, your COGS, your fulfillment costs back, and actually optimizing towards marginal outcomes. So you're not trying to maximize your revenue, but you're actually trying to maximize your profit. And yes. For example, like right now, let's say you sell furniture and you have a couch that's $2,000 and you have a lamp that's $50 and you put them in the same catalog, or if you put them in the same ad set, you're going to spend way more on the cheaper one because you're going to get more conversions than that. But that might not necessarily be the thing that you want to do for your business. And so what people do is they will fragment their account and add multiple ad sets, multiple campaigns to be able to do that. And then I think there's some level of that where you should do, but you lose the value of a lot of the optimization and machine learning if you're doing too much of that. And so I think in an ideal scenario, if you can actually pass back that value, that signal of what is important to your business with the profit things, and put that in a consolidation, I think you allow the machine to work better for you. So 100%. I'm very bullish on that one.
I am too. And it feels like one of the sort of last things that still people are hacking manually by setting up those ad sets that you mentioned, that really everyone would be better off if Meta could optimize towards it. Do you have any concerns about sort of offering that kind of like what products are most profitable for Jones Road, that kind of thing? What's your stance there?
No, I'd rather give all the data that the system needs to be able to optimize. And then another one, they call it PLTV, so it's like predicted lifetime value. But theoretically, that's another thing that we'll be able to do or test in the future is, hey, optimize towards people like this because, I'm willing to pay a little bit more for this customer in this region or this type of a person because they're actually worth more to our business over time.
Yep.
I'm not super bullish on that. It seems like a really hard problem to solve. I've talked to, product team about it as well. It's not like, let's say you're like Facebook, or your Uber or your Airbnb. There are so many like online or in-app events that you can then pass back and say, hey, I know that people that log into our app 7 times within the first 7 days, or if they do this event or if they sign up for this account or make it to this level, like a game, they're really high quality. They spend more, optimized to people like that. That is very possible for those e-com businesses. So much of the value happens offline. There's not that much data you can pass back to say, hey, if they did this action, they're going to be worth more. So I'm a little skeptical of that. Obviously, we're going to try it, but I think it's also very cool, though.
I never thought of it that way. I used to work in the app, Tapjoy, all that world. And you're right. Like it was a very exciting thing in 2013 when people started optimizing to specific events, in-game things. With e-commerce, you buy it or you don't. Offline's harder to track. So that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like looking back, ATT was this kind of weird, daisy, nightmarish fever dream from COVID. And it wasn't clear, oh my gosh, Facebook's going to be useless or not. Or I remember explaining to my 8-year-old at the time, well, Facebook has all this information about who buys stuff and now they won't. And so kind of obvious that it shouldn't work as well. Is it working less well? Talk to me about what they've done with the Advantage Plus suite. Like, what would you say to yourself 4 years ago, telling them how it pans out?
Yeah. Sean Frank from Ridge talks about this online all the time. He would have spent way more money and I would have done the same. We didn't realize how good we had it, being able to get, what was probably too good of performance. And it was just too easy. So yeah, I think it's working less well, but not that it doesn't work today. Facebook and Meta is still the best ad channel that we have for scale and efficiency. It's the one that almost every brand should be on. And, a lot of times until you get up to a bigger size, people don't have to diversify. It was so good before. And that's obviously more challenging. I think it's harder. I think if you're struggling, you have to have the proper AOV. You've got to have the right margins to be able to succeed. Like that's number one. Having a brand, the people that know you helps. Having a great product is probably more important. But if you have all those things, then a lot of your focus should be on creative. And media buying, I don't want to say it's dead. It's much simpler now. You're going to do a lot of the legwork with creative, and I think really thoughtful approach to that. But you've really got to be very good at that and test a lot and do it very strategically.
Strategic level is important, of course. Tell me about that. That's a controversial subject. You said media buyers sort of dead, not really. Yeah. I think you mentioned you use broad targeting. Talk to me about, Advantage Plus and just letting the algos take over. What does that mean on a day-to-day basis? And by the way, at any time, This is screen share. If you want to look into your account, even just glance at it while we talk would be helpful for people. But yeah, talk to us a little bit about the state of media buying.
Yeah. So a lot of it is focused on creative and creative testing. So I think you need a good system and a team and agencies because I don't think you can do it all in-house for most brands. But you need to be constantly refreshing creative and testing things and hopefully learning from it. You need a bunch of different styles of creative. I think it's best practice to run broad, and the best way that you are going to reach new audiences is not by going in and saying, hey, I want to target moms or I want to target people interested in Sephora. You're going to create an ad that's going to have a mom in it that's speaking to the problems and desires that a mom has. And you're going to do the same thing for beauty and same thing for health enthusiasts or whatever it is. So I think if you get really, really deep on your creative strategy, your research, your personas, you do need an account structure that allows for that. So you probably need some type of testing campaign and then, scaling campaigns. But yeah, I think majority of it should be broad. So you no longer need to go and, shut off ads as quickly because Meta is going to better optimize. But I still do think there are a lot of media buying things that people should do. Number one, your total spend and how that is relating to your efficiency, your, marketing efficiency ratio, your total contribution margin is really important. So we have our, multiple times a day, we look at how we're pacing and do we need to increase or decrease budgets to keep, those things in check. How are we allocating spend between our campaigns, between our regions, whether it's Europe. So I think a lot of it is tied to these like financial business targets that you have as well.
Yeah.
And I think
talk to
people
me
just
in specifics as you can of how you think about that there. And anything you might be able to show us or not. Like, I meet people that are like, as long as I'm over 1 ROAS, I'm happy. I meet people who are like, wow, those people don't know what they're doing. What about shipping? What about all the gross margin issues? I know people that are like, if I'm not at 4, then it's not worth doing.
Yeah.
How the heck do you decide, how much to spend in that context that you just shared, MER, all that, generally on Meta, to make sure it's efficient for you? And then maybe you can dig into the specifics of like, you got a new set of ads. How do you test them? When do you turn them off? That kind of thing.
Yeah. All right. So I'll go a little bit. I'll just kind of show something.
Sure.
Super quickly. Number one is really understanding your business and your numbers. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to optimize towards contribution margin. But what we're really trying to do is understand if I spend, different amounts of money at different, intervals, how am I really affecting our profit? And because you really need, to think about your contribution margin, which is your profit after all of your variable costs. It's just before your fixed costs like rent, payroll, and things like that. And so those aren't really going to be affected by your ad spend and your efficiency. So it's simpler to look at contribution margin. But you really need to know, what are your cost of goods? What's your total cost of delivery? And then
walk us through this sheet. I get that. You're like, what? Okay, if I sell this product, what is the actual incremental contribution to the business? This is fascinating. Yeah, if you can zoom in a little, even better, and tell us kind of what you're working with here, because I bet everyone's got something like this set up.
Yeah, for sure. Let me just, if I can figure out how to zoom in. I'm good at some things, not so good at others. Yeah.
And zoom.
There we go. Yeah. All right, cool. Let me go here. How's that?
Perfect.
All right, cool. So these are ours. Just hopefully no one shares them. But yeah, contribution margin is interesting because most margin, most like financial things that have margin in it, gross margin, net margin, EBITDA margin, landed gross margin, they refer to a percentage. Contribution margin is not an official accounting definition. So contribution margin is actually a dollar amount. And I think what we're really trying to do with our advertising is create the most contribution margin for the business. You take your contribution margin, you subtract all your fixed costs, you're left with profit, right? And, one of the things I learned, and it's super simple to say, but I learned the hard way, is you can't cash percentages, which means who cares about having a 50% contribution margin if having a 40% contribution margin but way more scale would actually give you more dollars, right? Would you rather have 10% of a dollar or 1% of many more dollars? And so for most people, what you should be trying to do is what is the right level of efficiency and volume that maximizes your contribution margin. So just to build a calculator like this, where the blue is the inputs, right? But you can input your spend, your marketing efficiency ratio, that's total, and so your MER, and then your COGS, and you can kind of get a contribution margin readout at different, so that's like right here, contribution profit, contribution margin.
By the way, I've never seen net revenue. It makes so much sense. It's like, yeah, that's your revenue, but what about returns? What about like tax? Like that's not actually stuff you get. It's like what's exactly. I almost call it like real revenue. It's like what's the actual net revenue? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll take that. We'll take 5 to 10% off of that, and then you've got to subtract what we would say. What else goes into contribution margin? So you take your gross revenue, you subtract whatever it is for returns, discounts. In there you're left with net revenue. And then you have your cost of goods. So that's what it, costs you.
And that's the widgets themselves and the shipping, I assume.
Shipping to a warehouse, but not shipping to the customer. So you have your cost of goods. I would say that's your gross profit. Your gross profit margin is just cost of goods, shipping to warehouse. And then you have all of your other fulfillment expenses, which are cost of delivery. So that's shipping to somebody. Those are your merchant processing fees, your Shopify platform fees.
Right.
And then you also have, if you use a warehouse, the pick and pack fees. So for us, right, we're looking at somewhere, beauty has pretty good margins. Let's say average people might have a 80% gross margin, which means of every $100 they make, $20 are going to creating that product, getting that product to the warehouse. And then an extra, let's call it another, I'll just make it up, 20%, right? So $20 are going to, like I described, that's your fulfillment. So that's shipping to a customer. That's your warehouse fees of pick and pack. That's your Shopify, variable fee. That's your merchant processing. And then so you're left with that number is really important. You're left with a landed gross margin of $60 with 60%. And what that means is that
what did you
could
call
spend
that? Landed gross margin?
Yeah, I call it landed gross. And that means you could spend $60 of a $100 order and for acquisition and break even. And so that number is super important to know.
$60 if you can spend 40 to get that person, you made $20.
$20, exactly. And so that leaves you your contribution margin. So then you take that landed gross margin of $60 of landed gross profit, and then you subtract your marketing from that. That's your CAC. And so let's say that's 20%. That would be great, right? These are obviously great numbers, but let's say you subtract that. Now you're at a $40 or a 40% contribution margin. And so those are like the really important numbers, right? And then let's say you spend 20%.
Pretty healthy, by the way.
Yeah, these would be like great numbers. Let's say you spent 20% on, payroll, rent, OpEx, business insurance, all that kind of stuff that doesn't change. It's not a variable cost. You'd be left with 20% EBITDA, which would be excellent. And so that's a great starting point, just to know your numbers where you're at. But then I find it really interesting to understand, well, how does playing around with that? Like, should I be spending, $20% essentially of my revenue on marketing, or should I scale? Should I spend 40% on marketing? Does that allow me to get revenue 40% higher? And when my revenue is 40% higher, but I'm less efficient, am I making more profit dollars at the end of the day or not? And so that's like where you start. Like that's the most important thing, and I think where people should be starting.
That's kind of what we plug in here. The way you have, and just and because it's almost like I can't see a way without walking through this that you would be able to really confidently answer the question: should I be spending more or should I be spending less? Because all the other prequel sort of numbers before you get to the actual contribution don't tell you the whole story.
For sure. So this is something we did for. Let me put some new stuff in here actually.
Yeah,
and I'll just kind of look at the top ones, and I'm like, all right, we're looking at October. We want to spend $3 million in October.
And I just want to say for folks, in case you came here for creative, like we're going to spend the whole second half on creative. Don't worry.
We'll get there. All right. Let's say like baseline, I think we can spend $3 million at a 4.5 MER. Well, that's going to give me 28% of my revenue on marketing.
And just for the folks, MER, media efficiency rate, how are you? What is that? Talk to us about that figure.
That one is just, and I'm trying to just keep this as simple as possible. That's just total revenue divided by total marketing spend.
Got it. So your revenue is 4.5 times the marketing spend.
We look and forecast really like an AMER, which is like new customer revenue divided by spend. But for this calculator, I just want to keep it as simple as possible. So if we did that, right, we would be left with, that would be the revenue, the net revenue, or that would be the net revenue that gives us contribution margin. So that's like our starting point. And now I'm like, okay, how do we budge that? How can we improve that? That's 43%. What if, and some of these are like what ifs, and I'm not saying they're all possible, but what if we did that and then we, let's say we wanted same efficiency, right? But we're like, okay, what if I spend more? Obviously, same efficiency, more spend, we're going to make more profit. Not more profit in terms of percentage, but more dollars, and that's the important thing.
And then you play with the efficiency and see if what it needs to be.
I don't know that extra, because that extra $500,000 is not going to be the same efficiency as your first $500,000. So it's going to go down. So let's say we wanted to see at a 4.2. Well, we are left with more. So that's actually better to do that. If that is possible, I'm going to choose this one every day.
You can cash the 5.4 million. It's not about the percentages. Yeah,
exactly. And then, all right, well, let me go. And then I'll do another one. Let's say we spend 4.5 million at a 3 MER, right? Because maybe that's what it degrades to. Revenue is actually lower. Let's say maybe 3.5, because that's probably a steep, curve. So revenue is higher now. That's great. We're actually making less profit though.
Right. And that's what profit's the point of business. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is a very simple way to look at it. You could say, okay, of all of the new customers I'm acquiring, what's their repeat rate over time, and how am I going to make more profit by the end of the year? Maybe you kind of look at CAC LTV, but for this is just trying to be really simple.
Is this all first order? Is this all just about the order that comes in? This is not about getting lifetime value. Yeah.
I mean, there is implied. I'm just trying to keep it as simple as possible. there's implied like revenue from repeat in here because I'm just looking at MER. I'm not looking at like AMER. But yeah, theoretically, you could take this into a forecast and be like, okay, well, if this was October, am I making more by January because I acquired all these extra customers? But if we're just trying to keep it simple, I would say, and for risk tolerance purposes, for most business, I'd prefer to, be profitable first order.
Yeah.
But I'm going to look at this and say, I don't think so. Like I wouldn't give this to my growth team and say, hey, here's your budget. I would try to then back this up and go, all right, well, maybe we go, 4.
This is super helpful. I want to zoom out to some conceptual things you just touched on, and then we're going to go to creative. So tell me, you just mentioned like, ideally you're profitable in first order. That's a whole debate out there. Most people listening to this are smaller than Jones Road and not spending, $2 or $3 million a month. What do you tell people when they ask you, should I literally just pay attention to first order? Because I'm first order, I'm profitable, but I'm hoping obviously some people repeat. Like, what's your philosophy there?
I don't think anyone knows their numbers in the first year or 2 years of business. And I've seen a lot more businesses think that they have really good LTV and then it kind of degrades over time for multiple reasons. Yeah. So I would much rather be very conservative until you really know your numbers and have multiple years of things. And there's just so much risk and it depends on your risk tolerance. Yeah. But I think almost everybody should be profitable or break even on first purchase and only try to lose money on first purchase strategically if you're a very savvy advertiser and you know your numbers and you can also have the cash flow to support that. But 95% of businesses should not.
Yep, that's helpful. There's one other thing, but you mentioned, but I forget what it was. Let's shift gears into creative. Again, talking Meta, you mentioned that they did not say AI a lot. Zuckerberg on the last earning call mentioned that he sees a future where all creative will be AI. You'll just give the things you want to Facebook and to Meta, and they will just make creative happen to hit the goals you just had on your spreadsheet. We're not there now. I don't feel. What are you thinking in terms of AI? What are they saying?
Great question. Yeah, I think you said that. I don't know if you said it on the call or before we were talking. You're like, Zuckerberg should be the furthest ahead, right?
He's my co-founder and I feel like the more senior you go, the further you need to be.
I love that. It's a great way to say it. Yeah, and so that's where he's thinking, and he's trying to build a vision and get Wall Street thinking about that, which is great. But at this Meta event, like they're also focused on how are we getting brands to spend this quarter. You know what I mean? And I just don't think AI is quite ready for prime time yet. And I get that's where it's going. And you and I have chatted about this separately. Yeah, I just don't think it's quite ready yet. And so I think we've got to balance that with also Q4 is a week away. What are we doing to create advertiser value right now?
What are the AI like doodads that they're showing off right now? What are they trying to push? I know they announced like less than a year ago, being able to make an image with AI. Probably they have something that you could put a background behind your product. I don't know. I remember they were auto writing descriptions that were kind of pissing people off because they're like, I didn't write that. And it's not exactly what we are. What are they pushing like specifically? Have you guys used it at all? Do you know anyone using AI for creative or anything else?
Yeah, I think it's kind of similar. It's like the AI sandbox where it'll create, different copy variations. You can put your landing page in and it'll give you different headline variations you can do. So it's not necessarily on like the ad creative level. It's more of like the headline, your copy, and they'll come up with different options and almost do like a dynamic creative. Yep. And then there's a lot of like sneaky checkboxes that they'll have on versus off. They'll auto crop stuff. They'll have background music. They'll call that their like
they'll just do it unilaterally without necessarily asking.
Yeah, I mean they're pretty sneaky about it. So you've got to like be smart about how can we shut it off. And they'll even have prompts.
There's text variations. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah. But I don't know anyone who's doing the background. Like I just don't think it's ready for prime time yet. I just think people want more control over it. So I think the AI, just don't forget, like ASC is built on AI, like their delivery systems. So, like there's a ton of AI. It's more of just like these models, that are built on rather than, Gen AI. So there's still a ton out there but in terms of Gen AI, I don't think anything is there yet in the Meta platform. So I wouldn't, focus too much on it right now, but pay attention to it because one day it will be there.
Yeah, one day. I feel like it's Michael Dell was saying, this AI talk reminds me of the internet, where there's a lot of hype. Internet like 1995. There's a lot of hype, and people are starting to say, "Who's making money? No one's making money from this thing." At that time, I was there. It was like nobody spending with a credit card. No one would ever do that on the internet. And then, of course, it just took over the world. And I do think that this will take over the world, whether it's like, I'm doing AI, I'm prompting this software, or it's more likely just enmeshed in everything we do. So I think Zuckerberg's probably right. You know, most people out here in this bubble of Silicon Valley and I'm in would tell you it's going to be all changed in 10 months. I've seen this movie before where it will be all changed, but it could be 5 years. I know that's like really contrarian to say because everyone thinks this is all going to be fixed overnight. But you and I have been watching for ChatGPT's been out like 3 years now, you know, and people aren't using it for this stuff.
Yeah, I could not agree more with that.
Tell me about creative. Show me kind of what you're working with and what you're running and what you like. What's new when it comes to Meta creative?
For sure. Cool. So the most important thing, and I'll share it, is creative diversity. It's something that Meta has been, you know, talking about and pitching and introducing for a while. And I would say first it's actually important to understand like why it's important. So again, the machine learning systems are so good now. You know, it's no longer best practice to go and say, hey, I want to reach people interested in this or people that have, you know, this data or credit card data. And so instead, most people are going to do broad targeting, which is not really broad. It still is strict defined targeting, but you're just doing it at the creative level. And so what happens is Meta will, first of all, you know, crawl your ads, your videos, you know, your statics, and they'll try to understand what it is about, right?
Let me pause on that. Do you have that on good authority that they do that, particularly with video? Because I agree with you.
No, I'm just assuming. No.
You're not sure. You're assuming. Okay.
No,
of course, no one knows for sure, but I'm pretty damn sure they are. Somebody pointed out they can see if there's a TikTok watermark and they'll warn you. So they're seeing stuff, and it's not that hard in this AI day and age to see that there's a woman or a man in the ad, or even the product is in the ad. Some of that stuff's kind of new and bleeding edge. Like Gemini can actually really map like a Jones Road skew to an ad, like a video of someone holding it. That wasn't possible a year ago. But I've got to believe that.
I'd be shocked if they don't. I mean, I can upload a screenshot of an image to ChatGPT and tell me to describe it, and even ask it to code it.
Exactly.
So I'd be shocked if not. But the other thing they do is when you launch an ad, right? You know, they will then serve impressions to different audiences and different kind of, you know, different people, and they will see who's engaging with it, right? How people
this is the creative and the targeting kind of they're throwing it around, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And then how they are purchasing, and then hopefully they're going to then show that ad to people that are more like that. They might say, hey, we showed that ad to people like John, people like Cody. I'm totally oversimplifying this, but people like Cody aren't that interested. People like John are pretty interested. They seem to be converting and engaging with that at a better rate. Let's go find more people like.
Yeah, this reminds me of a conversation when I was at Airbnb we would have about demographics being passé. This was like 7 years ago, and psychographics being important. And what, you know, our head of brand would point out is like, yeah, it's mostly hipster kids crashing at a, you know, place for South by Southwest or whatever. You know, back then, and we were trying to figure out how to get your aunt to use it. And there are some aunts who are really badass and cool and crash in places and go to South by Southwest who happen to be 63. And, you know, a targeting person wouldn't necessarily have picked them, but the algorithms now can just say like, oh, she seems to be interested in this stuff, right? Whereas maybe some young kid is like actually not fits all the demographics. You've heard that famous Prince Charles, Ozzy Osbourne thing where like on paper, they're like the same target, but they're completely different.
No, never. No, that's so funny.
Oh yeah. It's like I've got two Brits. It's like, I'm going to mash it up. Yeah. You can predict it like 60 to 75, you know, this and that. They're wealthy, but you're just picturing, and then it's like one's Prince Charles, one's Ozzy Osbourne. Like
so funny. Yeah. Very, very different. You probably would reach them with very different creative. But so that's what you want to do. You want to think about who you're trying to reach, what their persona are, right? What they care about, and create content that's speaking to them, that looks like people like them. And, you know, if you just create one style of content and you just do, you know, UGC with a 25-year-old creator talking about why your product is so good for this reason, you are going to reach, you know, one type of person. And that's fine. In initial stages, you just want product market fit. You just need to get, you know, some people knowing about you. Like that can take you pretty far. But as you grow and scale, you may hit plateaus and you need to expand. And you want to expand those audiences, not by targeting them, but by creating creative that speaks to different people. And maybe it's a different value proposition within the same, you know, demographic, or maybe it's a different persona. You know,
I feel like that's absolutely true. And most people don't do that with intention because it's also hard. We could talk about how to produce at scale and what that looks like and I want to see like how you test. You just reminded me of a latent question I had from your media discussion, which is, you know, like my cousin is starting a new e-commerce brand and she's asking like, what do I do? How's Facebook going to go? And I wonder what your response would be to somebody who it's their first ads that they're running. Is that going to be more or less efficient? Because you mentioned in the media discussion, your first 500 might do well. Doesn't mean your next 500 is going to be as efficient. What about like a new brand versus later on?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Initially, probably not. Most people, unless you're just super lucky, you have great product market fit, great brand awareness already. Most people aren't going to have great performance at the get-go, and you're going to have to test a lot of things. I would do a lot of statics because it's very easy to test messaging. And I would just be like, we don't really know. We don't know this product, what people love about it, what they don't. We don't know if people love it because it's clean. We don't know people love it because of the ingredients, because of problems it solves, because of benefits. And, it's something we're still uncovering, 4 years later. And, in terms of why do people love it? I think we know our core demos for us now. We don't know the new ones, but in the beginning, it's all just exploring. And so I just do a lot of statics and try to really uncover, do research, take your best guess, and just see what's landing. Put them all together in one campaign, one ASC, and be like, okay, these statics that are talking about this seem to be getting a lot better engagement, better performance. Let's double down on that. Let's make a lot more. So no, I think you're gonna have to do a lot of trial and error before you get it, but then hopefully you'll get some winners. And as your spend starts to grow, once you get the winner, it'll be more efficient. And then as you go from spending, $1,000 a day to $20,000 a day, you're probably not going to be getting more efficient because you're reaching people who newer, colder audiences, but you want to continue to test things to hopefully get. It's just like this constant battle between scale and volume makes your costs go up, but then you test things to make it go down.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's not really a simple answer. It's like it's probably hard to start. Then you find a groove that gets better, but then scaling it gets harder. Yeah, and the brand. And this also speaks to why brand is important. It's like we're all more likely to buy a Nike shoe, click on it, convert, than an Acme shoe or something we've never heard of. So that's a whole other discussion. Talk to me about how. So I mentioned most people don't do what you're describing with intention. People talk about it, they don't do it a lot. You don't see a lot of people saying, "Right, here's my Ozzy Osbourne ad, here's my Prince Charles ad." How do you do it? How do you think about it? And pile on a big question. What do you do when you've got this one value prop, this one angle, this one freaking line or discount that is just you cannot come close to it? And you're like, your CEO's like, we need to, juice it up for the holidays. It's like, well, we should probably spend more on that ad, but you also know that there's more out there and you want to diversify.
Great question. So number one, let me share my screen real quick to show you. Motion just came out with this new feature, and you can kind of create a board. So I created a board for them, but just want to share some of it. Yeah. So first, I think people are sometimes confused on what creative diversity is. Like Meta talked about this yesterday. It's like you want ads that look very different. I think so many marketers, especially performance marketers, are used to testing a background color or a different headline on the same static. Yeah. And I think you want to do ads that almost don't look like they're from the same brand, if that makes sense. They should just look very different. And so I think this is a good example of it where these guys, Timeline Nutrition, I think they do a great job. They've got statics. First of all, I'll talk about personas as well, but they've got statics, they've got videos, they've got more user generated videos. They've got branded videos. You know what I mean? So I think they do a great job of that. So there's a few brands.
That would be very handy to have a creative diversity one pager of cut, placements, types of video, GIFs, statics, value props, cut by value props, cut by personas, cut by the things you're mentioning. Yeah.
Give me 1 second to pull it up.
You have one.
I got to pull it up. Let me stop sharing and then pull up this one because I think this was something I was struggling with, and I found that our team was spending, and I wasn't planning to go over this, but I found that our team was spending too much time on the less important variables. Can you see this?
There it is.
So I think that these are the important things of hierarchy, and I think a lot of people spend time on variants. Hey, I'm going to create this one ad with 6 different hooks, and they iterate and they spend a lot of time on that. And so I'm not saying variants are unimportant. I just think you're going to have the biggest impact with higher up here, right? And so if we start there, audience avatar, if you want to get more spend, double your budget, you've got to unlock a new audience. You've got to appeal to new people. Maybe you thought it was just guys buying your product, and now you can advertise to women. Well, like now your audience is double the size of what it
Very
could
different
be.
ad. Yep.
Yeah, very very different ad, very different. Just different audience you're going to reach. And then the pillar, I think pillar is like your core messaging proposition to that audience. Like I think about it this way: like if you look at like Gary Vee and you look at his content or somebody like that, and even though he might produce 1,000 different pieces of social content, there's probably 4 themes that he talks about. He probably talks about, social. He probably talks about kindness. He talks about hustle, right? And I think like those are like the pillars, and every audience has a persona has a pillar. Or
Is
maybe
it like the
our
value proposition that matters to them, Cody?
yeah. So like millennial moms for us, they're busy. They care about health. They care about confidence, and they care about glow. And so like any of our ads should be those. And if we want to spend more and reach them, like we've got to unlock a new pillar and test one. But I think those are like the themes. The offer is important. That's not necessarily part of the creative, but it is. It's like what's your product? Is there any discount pricing? Like I put it in here because it's such an important part of its success. And then you have your concept. And I think this is where most people start a lot. This is like, what is the ad? Like what's the idea, right? Is it is this a UGC video? Is it a studio video? Things like that. Like, but your concept is almost like, if I was a creative agency and I was going to pitch it to you, that's like, hey, here's my idea for this ad. And then you have your format, right? That's like you said, static, video, GIF. I would say you have different types of things. Like you have, iPhone versus studio. That's your format. And so, like for example, I can take a pillar to an audience. Let's say a mom who is really busy, and their pillar is super busy, so quick makeup, and I can run an ad to them, and I could do it with talking in a studio. I could do it with UGC. I could do it with doing their makeup in the car. Those are all different concepts.
Yep.
But then I can also do it with a static ad as well. That would be a different format. So I'm taking that same audience, the same concept, but I'm doing a different format. And I think you should, but I think you'll have much less impact there. I think you won't be able to like make as big of a difference versus if you do a much bigger change. It's like when you're doing conversion rate optimization on a website, you're not going to lift your conversion rate 10% by changing your button color. But if you do an entirely new redesign or new sections, you might have a bigger impact.
I couldn't agree more. I call it light blue, dark blue background. It's just incredible what people get stuck on. I think this is really helpful to open your mind to it. Also, I was talking with a guy who worked at Instagram for many years, and he was on the data team trying to figure out how to balance the supply and the demand. And he was telling me a little bit about like how the ad serving works. And they're trying to get more people to make more video. But that's more their issue. But in my world, most of my brands are like making tons of videos, and statics can work because if you don't have statics, that's a whole sort of call by Instagram. Say, okay, give me a static here. And if you're not in that room, you're missing out on a lot of people. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, on that point, I was talking to my sister-in-law, and she was telling me, it's like a year ago that she misses how Instagram used to be, where it used to be friends and it used to be, statics. And like, I found that surprising because like, for me, I love like the reels, like the TikTokification of Instagram, like where it's just this like engaging content. And so the ads that I get look like that. They look like reels. But she said that, and I was like, let me see your phone. And, all of her ads static because that's what she's engaging with.
That's so interesting.
That's AI knowing that. So she could be the perfect person, perfect demographic for our products. But if all I ever did was studio 90-second videos, I'm probably not going to show her an impression for something that she could be in market for.
Yep, she's never going to see it. I wanted to ask you, and if you could show us stuff, great. If not, that's all right. Testing. I meet people who are like, listen, I can't test more than 8 things a month. Big companies, and it's got to go through this process, and I want to spend at least 10K on it to make sure it really works or not, especially if we're going to make it really good. And then I know people are like, I don't care, like make it as cheaply and efficiently as possible. I've given up on what works and what not. I've been wrong more than I'm right. And so I just try as many things I can all the time. And I don't care if it spends $1.17. If Meta didn't give it spend, it didn't give it spend. It probably knew it was in it. And something's going to rise to the top. What's your philosophy? I know it's broad and whatnot, but how do you think about this?
Yeah, I don't think anyone knows. I feel like there's wrong ways to test. I don't think there's a right way to test. I've been in search of the right way to test.
What are the wrong ways? Yeah.
It was different. So I think like first on like the whole like quality versus quantity thing, I don't know. Like I've definitely seen, that a lot of quantity really helps, right? because you just don't know sometimes. Like, I just think us as humans, we just don't really know what's going to work. And so I know some people that will just launch a ton of creative at once, make it fight for spend and see what gets spent. That's something like main signal. And I think that can definitely work. But I also think I have seen internal teams rush creative and not give it a second round of revisions or things like that to get out the door. And it obviously doesn't live up to the standard. So I also think quality is important. It's more subjective.
And
I'm
when you
not
say
saying
quality
that,
and
yeah.
subjective, right? Are you talking about the like, I don't think that's going to perform because I've been around the block and that thing doesn't perform. It's, get to the next cut. Or is it like, ooh, like Bobby Brown's going to, give me an email saying WTF with a screenshot?
Yeah. I think probably the former. Like, I think quality as it relates to performance is not what camera you shot it on, how pretty it looks, how expensive the ad was to produce. That's not what I mean. More of like, yeah, I think this will perform. Hey, look, because I've told my team before, I'm like, hey, I like this ad. Like, if I had more time to give feedback, I would love to do another round of revisions because I think we are too slow during this sequence, and that's based on things we've tested before. So that's kind of more of what I mean. So I think you want to balance it, and I think that's why you just need a lot of creative, and you can't do it all internally, and you need really good partners.
Well, let's talk about that. How you get this stuff done? How many ads are you producing a month across that triangle you gave us? What do you recommend for someone much smaller at different scales? And internal, external, you tell me.
Yeah. I don't know the number. We like to refresh creative weekly. And so I think most people should have a creative testing campaign. There's different ways to do it, but you should have a creative testing campaign where you have new ads that you launch on a cadence weekly. I know people that do it every day. I know that people do it every 2 weeks, whatever works for you, but it should be consistent. But for, if I have to pick one, I'd go weekly. Mondays, Thursdays, doesn't matter. You give it time to perform. You see how it does. Some people force spend to it with an ABO because they want to get data on it and learn. Some people like to do more of a CBO approach, make it fight for spend because spend is a really big, determinant. I happen to like that approach because I think that's important. And I've never really seen anything like not get spend and then force spend and it does well. So
almost the same thing.
Bias.
Everything either works or it doesn't right off the bat. But can you remember the feeling or an instance where you've seen an ad that you have given several revisions? You're like, oh man, I love this one, Bill. Like, great, can't wait to test it. And it's spent $2.43 in CBO, and you're okay with just like, all right, I guess that didn't work. Or
yeah, I think it depends. This is maybe a logical fallacy, but sometimes if we put a lot of effort into that or production cost into that, we will certainly push some spend to it. I just have never gotten that to necessarily work.
Yeah.
The challenge is, I think if you're trying to reach a new audience, this is something we're talking about is like, you should probably give it a little bit more time. Maybe the system is optimized towards the creative that is very similar. And so I think, for us, and this is more of a at scale thing, like if you're trying to reach a new audience, you have creative that's very different, maybe give it 2 weeks and maybe actually, force some spend to it and see how it does, because you're not going to unlock that new audience right away. So I'm open to that. But I think for most of the time, like we said, I never see forcing spend to it work if it didn't get spent naturally.
So you mentioned a testing campaign, a set, and then when it's a winner, you upgrade it, put it in a different set. You don't worry about, the whole thing of don't touch it if it's working. You just graduate it.
It's a great question. I don't. We'll leave it running. Usually what we have to do is limit like account changes to twice a week. So like we'll try to make like major changes, twice a week, just so we're not, resetting things too often. But yeah, we'll usually, graduate it to our evergreen scale campaigns. We've got a few different ones, some ASC, some manual. And depending on how it's doing the testing campaign, sometimes we'll leave it running until we know it's working in the other one. Sometimes we won't, but that's what works for us. Some people I know will just scale it up in that existing campaign, and if it's doing well, just scale it up.
Yeah. By the way, do you have an ad handy that you can play for us? We'd love to like contextualize this conversation by seeing kind of what you like, what you're running.
Sure. Let me let me see what I can find. So give me just 1 second. Just need 1 second, but I'll pull one up. Got always fun when you get a winner. Got a good top ad right now. So happy to share. Also, it's nice when it's different.
What's your stat? How often is it? I've heard people say 1 in 5, 1 in 10, 1 in 20, floats to the top and spends.
We don't track hit rate. I really want to start doing it.
What's your gut? If you looked at it, like how many ads of the ones you launch really become super winners?
Super winners, 5%. I don't know. Like
that's kind of where the conventional wisdom has been shifting. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, I think it's lower than it should be, but I don't know. guess it depends how you define it. But this one became a super winner. It's like getting a ton of spend. So, this is, I would say, our pillar of like anti-traditional foundation, we call it, talking to people who have used, traditional foundation for years, but as they are aging, it just doesn't sit right on their skin. And they want something, that's different, that has moisture. And so we've done different styles of it. Like we've done street interviews, we've done stuff with Bobby, but this is one that's done very well. So I will play it for a minute.
Why don't you wear traditional foundation anymore?
Why, girl? Let me tell you. This is why. I'm 63 years old. Have you seen my foundation drawer? It is full of expensive foundation that I don't use anymore, because the older I get, the more that foundation actually works against me and makes me look older. This is beautiful. It makes my routine in the morning so fast. It makes me look like I have natural, beautiful skin. Look at my skin. Look, do you see any powdery, cakey, old-looking foundation? It's been life-changing for me. I can't believe it's taken me so long to find this foundation. I don't need to put on a moisturizer before I apply it. I don't need to put on a primer before I apply it. And I don't need powder to set it. It just soaks into my skin. It feels like skincare, but it looks like beautiful, perfect skin. Aren't you glad you got me started?
What I love about that, so many things. One, there are parts of it that are not this exactly, but it's a really authentic story. Like the content of what she's saying, I imagine, because I'm not a 63-year-old woman, really is relatable to people in that state, right? It's not just, this is a game changer. You guys have to check out this, but like no one cares. It's actually real, and that's what works.
Appreciate that. Yeah, deep customer research, kind of understanding it. I think where our team is doing a great job is that, and I think where we are could do better, and we're really focusing on for the future is okay. Like we know that demographic, 63 years old, what they care about, foundation, but it's like, all right, what does the 45-year-old new mom care about? Like just trying to unlock those new personas is where we're trying to go with it.
Tell me about how you get this stuff done. And I will say I am a fan of quantity. Just as things go more algorithmic, I think quality is still important, but I think the fickleness of what performs really means you got to try, an array of things, kind of like you showed that upside down triangle.
Yeah.
Tell me about how you get stuff done, Cody, internally, externally, your view on internal creative production, external, and also putting yourself back in we were spending $100K a month instead of $1 million a month or more world of a few years ago, what you would recommend to someone in that boat.
All right, great question. So I'll start with now. At the stage of the game, that was probably an ad that we had an idea because we did a similar one. We did like a street interview one with very, very similar kind of format. And so it was something where it was just like, hey, like this is working. Let's have an internal brainstorm with our creative and growth team on like, why is this working? And like, how do we expand upon it? How do we iterate on it? And, I don't mean iterate, but like just let's do a new hook. But like, how do we produce new stuff while taking the learnings from this one, but kind of doing it in a different way? And so I think that, came out of that. But again, for that one ad that's crushing it, there's, 9 other ads that, are now paused. But so that was something that we briefed the creator. We did a brief, gave creator, we actually gave her, a few different ads to do. And that was the one that, happened to do really well. And the other thing we'll do is we'll share that with our agencies. We just try to partner with them as closely as possible and say, like, the guys want you to see, this is what did well. This is why we want you to do it well. Like, what ideas do you like? Here are our ideas. Can you guys go and produce this? Maybe we know one agency is better at this style of creative, or how can we turn this idea into a static, whatever it is. But we'll try to like share that just to like get those learnings kind of populating throughout our team, but also with agencies. If I was in the beginning, I would say, it really depends on your team makeup. Hopefully you have somebody internally who can, maybe they're not full-time dedicated, but you have somebody either on the growth team or creative team who can kind of do brief creators, brief a designer for statics and look at the data and do it.
Is that the playbook you would recommend? Is kind of like go to the creator platforms, go on TikTok and find creators you like and just kind of DIY it, get some designers on Upwork. Like, what's
I think you can do that. You can go, backstage or something like that to kind of find creators and actors, brief them. It's not crazy expensive. You can do that. But I would work with an agency or two because, you're also getting learnings from them. Like, it might be your first time doing it. But an agency, maybe they've worked with 5 other beauty brands or 5 other, mattress brands, and they have insights that you don't have. And that can be really helpful. And also
on the agency, sorry to interrupt, present company excluded. what has been your experience you just listed some of the pros, right? Bringing in new ideas, seeing what works for other folks. What about the cons? What about the in-between? Is it something you recommend earlier on or later stage? What's been your experience with agencies generally?
I think there's different agencies for different, sizes. The other pro, by the way, one other pro is they have new ideas and a fresh perspective. And sometimes we believe our own Kool-Aid too much, but I think agencies can see other brands that have done well, but also just like it's their first time seeing your brand. The cons, I would say, they might not get your brand and your kind of brand guidelines aesthetic as much as possible. It is harder to share information, to communicate data. Sometimes it's so much easier to do it internally. And then incentives are not, always aligned. But I think, with the right agency and the right partnership, those are all, very manageable. But I would say it depends, on a smaller scale, you're not going to get, you're not going to get Ready Set. You're probably not going to get the best agency in the world, but there are probably some good agencies that, can shoot some creative for you and work with creators and get you started until it grows.
I think I hear you. I think on the smallest side, like I mentioned, my cousin, just her and this trainer getting this brand off the ground. I just plug it, by the way. It's called Game Plan. It's like after workout wipes. It's actually a really good idea for a product. It's doing really well, but they're just starting. And agencies, someone to run Facebook ads for you, feel like it's lopsided. It's really expensive, but it's also hard to figure out yourself. I think in general, if you're super early, the more DIY, the better. And we have big fintech brands we work with now at Ready Set that started out just shooting everything themselves. Sometimes they still have a couple people in the office that shoot stuff themselves.
I mean, there's so much you can do with an iPhone and Canva. There's so much you can do. So like you don't stop, and we still do it at our scale. We still get an idea and we go and shoot stuff. So like, don't let lack of budget stop you. There's so much that you can do.
100%. Andrea in the chat, I think you answered this, but let's just hit on it real quick. Thank you for the question. Asked, how long do you let an ad go to see if it performs or not? Maybe give us some rough ranges. You talked about sort of your philosophy on that, but how fast do you kill things or not?
We usually like to launch things on a Monday or a Thursday. Usually give it 3 days. Mm-hmm. If it looks really bad, like terrible, meaning like either no spend or like spending, but like no performance and not good, like ADA metrics, like engagement metrics, we'll kill it. 3 to 4 days, but you really don't want to touch it before that, especially because we are on a CBO where it's allocating spend to hopefully where it's performing better. And also hopefully after 3 to 4 days, we also know if something is a winner, but we also have some stuff that's maybe in the middle. It looks good, but it hasn't got enough spend. We might have to leave that running for a week or so. So between 4 days and a week on average, I'd say.
Awesome. Cool, man. Cody, this has been incredible. My big takeaway is this phrase that started percolating a few years ago, creative is the new targeting. And when I started Ready Set 5 years ago, was not the thing. It was all about media and, getting cute and hacky with stuff. That phrase has really taken over, it sounds like, and creative is it. Even like super fine print data folks like Eric Seufert we had on Screen Share said the same thing. By the way, he is a fan of the like lots of quantity if you can make it happen. So that's my biggest takeaway. And I know you're super plugged in with the Meta folks, and this has been super, super awesome. I appreciate you joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. I'm glad it was helpful. I hope it was helpful, but thank you.
Thank you. I hate being pitchy, and my team gets mad at me if I don't say something. So, right. Ready Set is a digital agency. Sleepless.ai is meant to help internal teams. If you're getting ready for Black Friday and you're like, crap, I need more help. I need DR performance editors. I don't want an agency. I just need people. That's something to check out in Sleepless. And then we didn't have time for AirPost today, but if you have a new e-com company, you just need some shots, you need some ads, and you want to play around with AI, check out airpost.ai. Awesome. Thank you, Cody, very much.
Of course. Thank you.
All right. See ya.